Welcome, and thank you for joining me on this journey back in time to a land where the first whispers of civilization began to echo through the fertile valleys. Tonight, we will gently drift into the ancient world of Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, where the earliest city-states rose from humble villages to become the heart of a complex, thriving civilization. Imagine yourself there, surrounded by the sounds of distant flowing rivers, the rustle of reed huts, and the soft murmur of a world on the cusp of a transformative era. The land you are about to explore holds the mysteries of the Sumerian people, whose ingenuity, myths, and legacies have shaped the course of history. With each passing segment, we will unwind the threads of their story, connecting the past to the present, and finding comfort in the timeless rhythm of life. Let us begin with the dawn of cities, as villages grow into the first urban centers of human civilization. Feel the steady pulse of a world emerging from the simple, rural existence into something grander, more complex, and deeply interconnected. The birth of cities is often described as one of the most significant transformations in human history. For centuries, people lived in small, scattered villages, dependent on the surrounding land for food and shelter. Life was simple, yet full of challenges. Gathering food, protecting their homes, and surviving the changing seasons. Yet, in the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, something remarkable began to happen. Gradually, the people here began to abandon their transient ways of living. Instead, they started building permanent settlements, creating a foundation for something much larger than they could have imagined at the time. As you picture this early period, imagine the quiet hum of daily life as small communities along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers began to cluster together. The land between these great rivers, known as Mesopotamia, was lush and rich, perfect for farming. Over time, agriculture became more efficient, and people were able to grow surplus food. This surplus allowed for a growing population and the eventual rise of urbanization. Villages expanded into small towns, and these towns began to form the first proto-cities. These early cities were unlike anything seen before. They were hubs of activity, places where artisans, traders, farmers, and craftsmen came together. Imagine yourself walking through these streets, where the air is thick with the smells of freshly baked bread, the hum of conversation in a dozen languages, and the rhythmic pounding of tools as blacksmiths forge weapons, plows, and tools for daily life. The streets are narrow, the buildings made from mud bricks, and every corner seems to bustle with the energy of life. There's a certain simplicity to it, yet you can sense that something much larger is at play. This is the beginning of something profound, the foundation of civilization itself. The process of city building was a gradual one, with small settlements banding together for mutual benefit. Over time, as the cities grew in size and importance, they began to develop their own unique characteristics. Each city-state was distinct, with its own rulers, gods, and customs. But they all shared something essential, a dependence on the rivers that sustained their crops, provided water for daily life, and served as vital trade routes. In this segment, we focus on the early rise of these cities and the way they transformed the lives of the people living within them. The cities of Sumer, Uruk, and Lagash are often cited as some of the first true cities in human history. But what set these cities apart? Was it merely their size, or was it something deeper? It was their ability to harness the land, the rivers, and most importantly, their people, in ways that had never been done before. As these cities grew, so too did the need for organization. The people of Sumer developed intricate systems of governance, trade, and law to help manage the complexities of their new urban life. Imagine yourself witnessing this shift, an organized society emerging with early forms of leadership taking shape. Kings and priests would eventually rise to power, their authority legitimized by divine right, creating a strong connection between the human world and the gods above. In this way, the Sumerians set the stage for what would become the blueprint for future civilizations. As we conclude this first segment, we reflect on the quiet but powerful changes that mark the birth of the Sumerian city-states. From humble beginnings in the fertile land between rivers, these cities grew to shape the course of history. The transformation from village to city was not only a shift in geography, but in the very way people lived, worked, and interacted with one another. A new chapter in human history was beginning to unfold, one marked by the steady rhythm of growth, innovation, and the constant flow of time. Now, imagine yourself standing on the banks of the Tigris River. The water stretches out before you, shimmering under the warm sun. To your left, the Euphrates flows, a meandering current that snakes through the land, nourishing the soil and shaping the world around you. This is the heart of Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, a region that will become the cradle of civilization itself. The geography of Mesopotamia played an essential role in the rise of the Sumerian city-states. The land, while arid and largely barren, was made fertile by the two great rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates, with their annual flooding, brought life to the land. These floods deposited rich silt onto the floodplains, creating soil that was perfect for growing crops. The irrigation systems developed by the Sumerians harnessed the power of these rivers, allowing them to manage and control the flow of water to their fields. Picture the ingenuity involved: carefully built canals, levees, and dikes to redirect the floodwaters, ensuring a steady supply of water throughout the year. But the land between these rivers was not without its challenges. Mesopotamia, as you may imagine, was a place of extremes. The climate was harsh, with searing heat during the summer months and occasional cold snaps during winter. The rivers, while life-giving, were also unpredictable. Sometimes they would flood too much, destroying crops and homes. Other times, the water would be too low, leaving the fields dry and barren. Yet, despite these challenges, the people of Mesopotamia learned to adapt and thrive. The environment, with its extremes, shaped the culture and mentality of the Sumerians. Their world was one where survival depended on the careful balance of nature. The rivers, while vital, were also dangerous, and the people's relationship with them reflected a deep respect for the forces of nature. Life here was a constant cycle of work and adaptation. In the fields, workers toiled under the harsh sun, managing irrigation systems, planting and harvesting the crops that would feed the city-state. The hum of daily labor, men and women working side by side, their hands stained by the soil, is almost palpable as you imagine this scene. In the cities, the power of the rivers was felt in more ways than one. Not only did they provide sustenance, but they also served as major trade routes. Goods from all over the ancient world traveled along these rivers: grain, wool, timber, and precious metals. Imagine the bustling trade markets along the banks of the rivers, where merchants from distant lands arrived by boat, their cargoes loaded with exotic goods. The sound of haggling, the clinking of coins, and the exchange of goods filled the air. The rivers were not only a source of life, they were lifelines connecting the people of Sumer to the outside world. But as we journey deeper into this world, we must also consider the significance of the rivers beyond their practical use. The Tigris and Euphrates were not merely physical entities, they were imbued with meaning. treated with reverence by the Sumerians. The rivers were often depicted in Sumerian mythology as powerful forces that shaped the fate of the people. In their religious beliefs, the gods controlled the water, and the rivers were seen as channels through which divine will flowed. Imagine how the early Sumerians, standing on the riverbanks, would have looked out over the water, feeling a deep connection to the land, the rivers, and the gods who ruled over them. It is this connection to the land and the rivers that helped shape the first great city-states of Sumer. The steady flow of water, combined with the rich soil, allowed for the growth of cities like Uruk, and Lagash, which became the powerful hubs of commerce, culture, and governance. The land between the rivers wasn't just a place of physical survival, it was a foundation for the development of a sophisticated civilization, one that would leave its mark on history. As we close this segment, we reflect on the essential role that geography played in the rise of the Sumerian city-states. The land between the rivers was both a gift and a challenge, a place where human ingenuity and nature's unpredictability intertwined. This land, so rich in resources and yet so fragile, became the birthplace of cities, of governance, and of culture. The Sumerians, through their careful stewardship of the land, would lay the groundwork for the complex urban centers that would soon rise to prominence, forever changing the course of history. As the Sumerian city-states began to grow in size and complexity, so too did the need for leadership. From the quiet riverside villages to bustling urban centers, the shift towards organized governance was inevitable. But in the beginning, leadership wasn't a simple matter. Power in the early days was not handed down through dynasties or inherited through royal bloodlines as we might think of kings today. Instead, rulers often arose from within the community, their power legitimized through religion, military prowess, and the sheer force of will. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of an early Sumerian city. The air is thick with dust as traders and farmers fill the streets. At the center of this city stands a grand ziggurat, its massive terraced structure rising high above the surrounding buildings. It's here, atop this monumental step pyramid, that the connection between the divine and the earthly is most apparent. The priests and rulers of the city would perform rituals to honor the gods, ensuring that the divine favor flowed down to their people. The ruler, often seen as a divine figure, was not only the head of state, but also the intermediary between the gods and the people. In these early days, kingship was inextricably linked to religion. To be a king in Sumer was to be a servant of the gods. This was not just a title, it was a role that came with a deep spiritual responsibility. The ruler was expected to maintain order, protect the city, and ensure that the will of the gods was upheld. They were seen as chosen by the gods, their power granted through divine will, and in many ways, their actions were thought to reflect the favor or disfavor of the deities. One of the most famous of these early kings was Gilgamesh, the legendary ruler of Uruk. Picture the scene: a tall, regal figure, dressed in fine robes and a crown, striding through the streets of his city. His subjects looked up to him not just as a king, but as a demigod, descended from the gods themselves. The myths surrounding Gilgamesh portray him as both a wise and a flawed ruler. His strength and leadership were admired, but his early years were marked by tyranny and arrogance. It was only after a series of divine interventions that Gilgamesh learned the true meaning of leadership. He realized that to be a great king, he must be a protector of his people, rather than a ruler who commands out of fear. It is in the Epic of Gilgamesh that we see how Sumerian kingship was entwined with divine expectations. In the famous tale, Gilgamesh embarks on a journey in search of immortality, driven by his fear of death. Along the way, he faces trials that challenge not only his physical strength, but his understanding of what it means to be a leader. Through his adventures and encounters with gods, demons, and mythical creatures, Gilgamesh comes to understand that true immortality lies not in avoiding death, but in the lasting impact a ruler can have on their people and their city. While Gilgamesh's story is one of myth and legend, it reflects a deeper truth about the role of the Sumerian kings. These rulers were expected to embody the ideals of leadership, strength, wisdom, fairness, and a deep connection to the divine. And in many cases, their power was upheld through myth, where their deeds were exaggerated and their virtues glorified, ensuring that their legacy would live on in the memories of their people. But not all Sumerian kings were as legendary as Gilgamesh. Many were more ordinary men, chosen for their ability to lead and defend their people. These kings were often warriors, skilled in battle and adept at defending their cities against rival city-states. Sumer was a land of constant conflict, with city-states frequently at odds over resources, territory, and power. The ruler's ability to command an army and lead his people in times of war was a crucial aspect of his rule. Picture the sight of these kings, their armor shining in the sun as they led their troops into battle, their chariots racing across the plains in defense of their city. But with the rise of kingship also came the need for more formalized systems of governance. As the city-states grew, so did the complexity of their society. Rulers had to delegate authority, establish laws, and maintain order within their cities. The first codified laws of Sumer came into being during this period. These early laws were often written down on clay tablets, a precursor to the written codes of law that would shape later civilizations. These laws were not just legal frameworks, they were moral guides designed to ensure that the will of the gods was followed and that justice was maintained. The early kings of Sumer were thus not just rulers in a political sense. They were spiritual leaders, military commanders, and lawmakers, all rolled into one. Their lives were a balancing act between the divine, the earthly, and the practical demands of governance. As you imagine these rulers, think of them as both revered and feared, their power rooted in the belief that they were chosen by the gods to lead their people. As we wrap up this segment, we reflect on the profound role that religion played in legitimizing the power of the early kings of Sumer. Their kingship was not merely political, it was divine. And while the stories of these early rulers may have been embellished over time, their influence and legacy shaped the development of kingship in ancient civilizations for centuries to come. The rhythm of their rule, intertwined with the cycles of the seasons and the will of the gods, created a stability that allowed the Sumerian city-states to flourish, laying the groundwork for the great civilizations that followed. Imagine the sun setting over the sprawling city of Uruk, casting long shadows across the bustling streets and marking the end of another long day. In the distance, the towering ziggurat stands, its massive stepped structure reaching towards the sky like a sacred mountain. This is not just any building, it is the heart of the city, the center of religious life, and a symbol of the Sumerians' deep connection to their gods. Ziggurats, with their imposing size and elaborate design, were not simply places of worship. They were manifestations of the Sumerian worldview, a reflection of their understanding of the universe, the gods, and their place within it. Ziggurats were monumental structures, built to honor the gods and serve as the focal point of religious activity. They were step pyramids, often with several levels, each one smaller than the one below it, creating a sense of ascent towards the heavens. Imagine yourself approaching one of these massive ziggurats, its walls made of mud brick, weathered by centuries of sun and rain. As you draw closer, you can almost feel the weight of history pressing down on you, the echoes of ancient prayers and rituals reverberating through the air. At the top of the ziggurat, a temple dedicated to a particular god would stand, an intimate space for priests and rulers to commune with the divine. For the Sumerians, the ziggurat was not only an architectural marvel, it was also a physical representation of the connection between the earthly realm and the divine. Each level of the ziggurat was symbolic of a higher state of being, moving closer to the gods with every step. The Sumerians believed that the gods lived in the heavens, and the ziggurat acted as a bridge between the human world and the divine realm. The temples at the top were the places where the high priests and kings would make offerings and perform rituals, seeking the gods' favor and guidance. The most famous of these ziggurats is the Great Ziggurat of Uruk, dedicated to the moon god Nana. Picture the scene. At the base of the ziggurat, the city of Uruk stretches out in all directions, a vast, bustling metropolis filled with merchants, craftsmen, and farmers. The air is thick with the sounds of daily life, laughter, bargaining, the rhythmic tapping of artisans at their work. But as you approach the ziggurat, the noise fades, and you are drawn into a sense of reverence. The ziggurat stands as a silent testament to the Sumerians' devotion and their belief in the power of the gods. Its immense size dwarfs everything around it, making it impossible to ignore or overlook. The process of building such a grand structure was not a simple task. The labor required to construct a ziggurat was immense. Thousands of workers, artisans, and engineers were involved in its creation. They toiled under the hot sun, hauling mud bricks, carving intricate designs, and carefully constructing each level. Imagine the sense of accomplishment they must have felt as they watched the ziggurat rise higher and higher, closer to the gods. Each brick laid was a symbol of their devotion, their effort to honor the divine. Inside the ziggurats, the temples were equally impressive. The Sumerians believed that the gods resided in these sacred spaces, and only the highest priests and kings were permitted to enter. Imagine stepping into one of these temples, the air cool and heavy with incense. The space is dimly lit by the soft glow of oil lamps, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. The smell of burning incense and the murmur of priests chanting can be heard as they perform rituals to appease the gods. These sacred spaces were not only places of worship, but also centers of political power, where kings would perform ceremonies to solidify their divine right to rule. The connection between religion and governance was inseparable. Rulers were seen as earthly representatives of the gods, and their actions were believed to directly reflect divine will. The ziggurats were not just symbolic structures, they were also practical ones. They served as centers for religious education, where priests learned the sacred rites and rituals that govern the Sumerian way of life. They were places of administration, where scribes would record the decisions made by the king and where laws and decrees were enacted. The ziggurats and temples thus played a crucial role in the daily functioning of Sumerian society, serving as both spiritual centers and hubs of governance. As we reflect on the significance of the ziggurats, we can appreciate how deeply intertwined religion and governance were in Sumerian society. The ziggurat was a powerful symbol of the divine order, a physical manifestation of the belief that the gods were always watching over the people, guiding their actions, and providing for their needs. In this way, the Sumerians saw themselves as part of a larger cosmic order, with their kings and priests serving as mediators between the divine and the human realms. The ziggurats also played a role in unifying the city-states. Despite their frequent conflicts and rivalries, the presence of these monumental structures reminded the people of Sumer that they shared a common religious and cultural heritage. The ziggurats stood as a constant reminder of the gods' power and the central role of religion in everyday life. As we close this segment, we can reflect on the awe-inspiring presence of the ziggurats and the temples within them. These structures were not just architectural feats, they were deeply symbolic, representing the Sumerians' understanding of the universe and their place within it. The ziggurat, towering above the city, was a physical and spiritual link between the heavens and the earth, a constant reminder that the divine was always present, guiding the course of history. Now, imagine yourself in a small, dimly lit room. The air is warm with the scent of clay and ink. Before you, on a smooth clay tablet, sits the first glimmers of history, a series of wedge-shaped symbols etched carefully into the surface. This is the beginning of written language, the dawn of an entirely new way of recording and transmitting knowledge. Welcome to the world of cuneiform, the earliest known system of writing developed by the Sumerians. Cuneiform is more than just a way to write. It's a window into the past, a tool that allowed the Sumerians to document their daily lives, their laws, their religious practices, and even their dreams. Imagine yourself sitting at a table alongside the scribes who first shaped this revolutionary form of communication. These scribes, many of whom were trained from a young age, held a unique and revered position in Sumerian society. They were the keepers of knowledge, the ones who could read and write in a world where literacy was a rare and powerful skill. The writing process itself was meticulous. Scribes used a reed stylus to impress symbols onto soft clay tablets. The stylus was pressed into the surface at an angle, creating the distinct wedge-shaped marks that would come to define cuneiform. Picture the rhythmic motion of the scribe's hand, the gentle scratching sound as the stylus meets the clay, the careful attention to each mark. Every symbol was carefully crafted, representing ideas, words, or sounds, making cuneiform both a visual and symbolic language. As we reflect on this, imagine the importance of these records. The earliest cuneiform inscriptions were simple, functional marks used for administrative purposes, tracking trade, recording the amount of grain harvested, or cataloging livestock. These early records helped manage the growing complexity of city life, where trade, taxes, and the distribution of resources needed careful oversight. A tablet might note the amount of grain owed by a farmer, the goods exchanged in a market transaction, or the amount of tribute to be paid to a ruler. These practical uses of cuneiform were essential to the functioning of the Sumerian city-states, allowing for a level of organization that had never before been possible. But cuneiform was not just a tool for administration. Over time, it evolved into a rich and complex writing system that was used to record myths, laws, and stories. The first written stories, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, were penned in cuneiform. Imagine the weight of those early words, carefully inscribed on clay, telling tales of gods and heroes, of the quest for immortality, of battles and friendships. The scribes who wrote these stories were not just chroniclers of events. They were creating a new form of art, a form of expression that would transcend time. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, is often considered one of the earliest masterpieces of world literature. In this tale, we find the story of Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, who embarks on a journey to find the secret of immortality. Along the way, He faces trials, meets gods and monsters, and ultimately learns that immortality is not something that can be achieved through power or fame. Instead, it is found in the legacy one leaves behind, the impact one has on the world and the people around them. This story, recorded in cuneiform, captures the universal themes of life, death, and the search for meaning. Imagine the way these words would have resonated with the people of Sumer as they first read them, their thoughts echoing across the centuries. In addition to stories and myths, cuneiform was used to record laws. The famous Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the oldest known legal codes, was written in cuneiform on clay tablets. This code set out laws regarding everything from marriage and divorce to theft and punishment. Imagine how these laws must have shaped the daily lives of the Sumerians. The written word gave them a sense of order, a way of understanding their society and the expectations placed upon them. It's almost as if, through these inscriptions, the very fabric of their civilization was woven together, stitch by stitch. The spread of cuneiform also had far-reaching effects beyond Sumer. As the Sumerian city-states expanded and interacted with neighboring regions, the script spread along with them. It was adopted by many of the cultures that came after the Sumerians, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. This means that cuneiform became a key element in the development of ancient Mesopotamian culture, helping to preserve the history, laws, and stories of the region for generations to come. But, as with all things, cuneiform eventually faded from use. Over time, the rise of other languages and scripts, such as the Phoenician alphabet, led to the decline of cuneiform. Imagine the moment when the last scribe put down his reed stylus, knowing that the once great writing system had outlived its usefulness. The tablets, once filled with the knowledge of a great civilization, were left to gather dust. Yet, even as cuneiform disappeared from the pages of history, its impact lived on. The very concept of writing, of recording the past, was forever changed. The Sumerians had set the stage for the future of communication, ensuring that the stories of their people, stories of gods, kings, and commoners, would endure. The legacy of cuneiform can still be felt today, in every book, every written document, and in the very act of writing itself. As we conclude this segment, we can reflect on the power of the written word. The cuneiform was not just a tool for administration or record-keeping. It was the key to understanding the past, to preserving culture, and to transmitting knowledge across time. Without it, the stories, laws, and myths of the Sumerians would have been lost to history. But through the clay tablets and the wedge-shaped symbols, they found a way to speak to us across the millennia, reminding us of the importance of writing and the power it holds. Now, let us imagine stepping into the heart of a bustling Sumerian market. The air is warm, filled with the clamor of bargaining and the smell of fresh bread baking in nearby ovens. As you walk down the narrow, dust-filled streets, you pass merchants peddling their wares. Brightly dyed textiles, polished metals, grains, and pottery, all neatly displayed in open stalls. The market is a vibrant hub of activity, but beneath the surface, it is also a testament to the sophistication of the Sumerian economy, which was driven by agriculture, trade, and a complex system of labor. The foundation of the Sumerian economy was agriculture. The fertile soil between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers provided the perfect conditions for farming. Imagine yourself standing in the fields, watching as workers tend to the crops, sowing seeds of barley, wheat, and flax. The rhythm of their work is steady and unhurried, a reflection of the seasons and the steady passage of time. The Sumerians grew enough surplus food to support their growing cities and trade networks. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy, but it was far from the only contributor. As you continue through the market, you see that trade plays an equally important role. The Sumerians were master traders, exchanging goods not just with their neighbors, but with far-off lands as well. Their location, between two great rivers, made them ideal intermediaries for trade, and the Sumerians took full advantage of their position. Imagine the bustling docks along the rivers, where boats laden with goods from the east, west, and beyond are loaded and unloaded. Spices, timber, metals, and precious stones from the mountains and deserts flowed into Sumerian cities, while grain, textiles, and pottery traveled outward. The markets, vibrant as they are, also give you a glimpse into the structure of the Sumerian economy. Trade was highly organized, with merchants and traders working within a set of rules and customs that ensured the smooth flow of goods. Imagine the skilled scribes who recorded each transaction, writing down the goods exchanged, the prices paid, and the terms of the trade in neat cuneiform script. These records were vital for maintaining order in an economy that stretched far beyond the walls of any one city. As you picture these scribes at work, you realize that the economic system of Sumer was not just a series of isolated transactions, but a complex network that connected cities, regions, and even distant lands. Labor, too, was a crucial element of the Sumerian economy. It's in the marketplace that you begin to understand the importance of skilled labor and the way it was organized. The Sumerians had craftsmen for nearly every trade: potters, weavers, metal workers, and builders. Imagine the work that went into creating the beautiful pottery and intricate jewelry that filled the markets. You can almost hear the rhythmic tapping of hammers on metal, the spinning of potters' wheels, and the hum of the loom as skilled hands create goods that will be traded far and wide. However, not all labor was performed by skilled artisans. The Sumerians also relied heavily on slave labor, a practice that was woven into the fabric of their economy. Slaves were often prisoners of war, debtors, or individuals who had been captured in raids, and they played a crucial role in the functioning of the cities. Imagine the scene of a slave working in the fields under the watchful eye of a supervisor, or laboring in the workshops, their movements swift but mechanical. Although the lives of slaves were harsh, they were an essential part of the workforce that made the Sumerian economy function. The role of slavery in the Sumerian economy is a reminder of the inequalities that existed in society. While the kings, priests, and wealthy merchants enjoyed the fruits of trade and surplus food, much of the labor that fueled this prosperity came from those who had little control over their own lives. It's important to reflect on this aspect of Sumerian society, not as an attempt to sensationalize the past, but to acknowledge the full complexity of their civilization. The economic systems that supported the cities of Sumer were built on the backs of both the free and the enslaved. As we continue to explore the Sumerian economy, it's clear that this was not just a system of survival. It was a highly sophisticated and intricate network that relied on cooperation, skill, and organization. From the farmers who grew the food to the merchants who traded goods, from the scribes who recorded the transactions to the slaves who worked the fields, each part of the economy played a vital role in sustaining the growing city-states. And yet, despite the complexity of the Sumerian economy, it was not without its challenges. As the city-states grew larger and more powerful, the pressures on resources, trade, and labor became more intense. Conflicts over trade routes, land, and water rights were common, and the Sumerians often found themselves in competition with other city-states. Picture the tensions rising between cities like Uruk, Lagash, and Uruk, each one seeking to control the wealth and resources of the region. These tensions would eventually lead to conflict, as we will explore in later segments, but for now, it is important to acknowledge the deep interdependence of the Sumerian economy, a system where every person, from the king to the slave, had a role to play in maintaining the balance. As we conclude this segment, we reflect on the complexity of the Sumerian economy. It was an economy built on agriculture, trade, and labor, woven together by the threads of organization and skill. The prosperity of the city-states relied on a delicate balance, one that involved both cooperation and exploitation. The marketplace, with its sounds and smells, its transactions and exchanges, was a microcosm of a society that had mastered the art of survival, even as it laid the foundations for a future of increasing complexity. Now, imagine yourself sitting in the quiet, dim-lit hall of a grand palace in the city of Uruk. The walls around you are decorated with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of gods and heroes, warriors and battles. The atmosphere is thick with incense, and the sounds of distant chatter and music float through the air. At the heart of this setting, a storyteller stands before a gathered audience, his voice steady and measured as he begins to recount one of the greatest tales ever told, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The story of Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, is perhaps the most famous and enduring tale from ancient Sumer. It is a tale of power, friendship, loss, and the search for immortality. Picture the king, a figure larger than life, standing tall with his regal crown, his eyes fixed on the horizon as he surveys his mighty city. Gilgamesh is not just a king, he is a demigod, 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. He is a ruler of unmatched strength and wisdom, but his story is also one of profound humility and personal growth. In the early chapters of the epic, Gilgamesh is portrayed as a mighty and fearless king, revered by his people, but also feared. His strength is legendary, but his rule is harsh. He takes whatever he desires without regard for others, even pushing his people to their breaking point. Imagine the discontent in the streets of Uruk, people whispering, praying to the gods for relief from the tyrannical king who governs with an iron fist. His actions seem unstoppable, and yet the gods, sensing the imbalance in the city, decide to intervene. The gods respond by creating a wild man named Enkidu, a figure of equal strength to Gilgamesh, who is sent to challenge him. Enkidu, initially unaware of human civilization, lives with the animals, roaming the wilderness. But upon encountering a temple prostitute, he is introduced to the ways of human society, and his transformation begins. Imagine the clash between Enkidu and Gilgamesh when they first meet. Two powerful men, each unwilling to yield to the other, testing each other's strength and resolve. Their struggle is intense, but in the end, they recognize each other's worth and form a deep bond of friendship. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu embark on a series of adventures. They slay the monstrous Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest, and kill the bull of heaven, sent by the goddess Ishtar. As they journey together, the bond between them deepens, and they become inseparable. They share their hopes, fears, and dreams, facing life and death side by side. The rhythm of their friendship is steady and enduring, a testament to the transformative power of companionship. But their adventures are not without consequence. One day, the gods punish Enkidu for his role in the killing of the bull of heaven, and he falls ill. As Enkidu's life slips away, Gilgamesh is struck by a profound grief, a grief that shakes him to his core. For the first time, Gilgamesh is confronted with the inescapable reality of his own mortality. Imagine his sorrow as he sits beside his dying friend, unable to change the course of fate. The loss of Enkidu shatters him, and he is left to grapple with the ultimate question: is there a way to avoid death? In his quest for immortality, Gilgamesh sets out on a journey to find Utnapishtim, a man who was granted eternal life by the gods after surviving a great flood. This journey, which takes him through treacherous mountains and dangerous waters, is one of introspection and discovery. Along the way, he faces a series of tests, each one forcing him to confront his fears and doubts. He meets the Scorpion people, who guard the entrance to the mountains of the gods, and hears tales of the great flood that once wiped out humanity. Each encounter deepens his understanding of life and death, and the realization slowly dawns on him that immortality is not something to be achieved, but something to be accepted. When Gilgamesh finally meets Utnapishtim, he is told the story of the flood, a tale that mirrors the biblical story of Noah. Utnapishtim explains that immortality is a gift bestowed by the gods upon a chosen few, and that no mortal can escape the inevitability of death. Imagine the weight of this revelation settling over Gilgamesh as he listens to Utnapishtim's words. The quest for immortality was, in the end, a futile one. But there is wisdom in Utnapishtim's words, a quiet acceptance of the cycles of life that can offer comfort in the face of inevitable death. In the final chapters of the epic, Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, forever changed by his journey. He comes to understand that immortality is not found in the avoidance of death, but in the legacy one leaves behind. His achievements, his wisdom, and the city of Uruk itself will live on long after his death. As you picture Gilgamesh standing before the walls of his great city, looking out over the skyline, you can almost feel his sense of peace. He may not have achieved eternal life, but in a way, he has found a form of immortality through his actions, his friendship, and the stories that will be told about him for generations to come. The story of Gilgamesh is more than just a tale of a king's search for immortality. It is a reflection on the human condition, on the nature of life and death, and on the power of friendship and legacy. As we reflect on this epic, we see that the quest for meaning is a universal one, transcending time and culture. Gilgamesh's journey reminds us that, in the end, it is not the length of our lives that matters, but the way we live them and the impact we have on the world around us. As we conclude this segment, we reflect on the enduring power of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It is a story that continues to resonate with us today, reminding us of the timeless questions that every human faces: the quest for meaning, the fear of death, and the desire to leave a lasting legacy. In the ancient city-states of Sumer, society was often seen through the lens of male-dominated power structures, where kings, priests, and warriors held the reins of leadership. And yet, as we walk through the streets of Uruk or Lagash, there is an undercurrent of complexity that reveals a more nuanced story. Women, though not always in the spotlight of power, played pivotal roles in the social, religious, and political spheres of Sumerian life. Their contributions, though sometimes subtle, were vital to the functioning of society and left a legacy that would resonate through history. Imagine yourself in the bustling marketplace, surrounded by merchants and traders haggling over goods. Amid the noise and commotion, you might spot a woman, standing firm in the crowd, her posture strong and dignified. She is not just a bystander, but an active participant in the economic and social life of the city. Women in Sumerian society could own property, engage in trade, and even manage their own businesses. Picture a woman running a shop or overseeing the sale of goods, perhaps negotiating prices with a merchant. This was not an unusual sight in Sumer, where women could hold economic power, especially in the absence of their male relatives. Women also played an essential role in religious life. The most significant religious figure in any Sumerian city-state was often the high priestess, a woman chosen by the gods themselves. The high priestess was more than just a religious leader. She was a figure of great political influence and often enjoyed privileges on par with the male rulers of the city. She would preside over rituals and ceremonies, ensuring that the gods were appeased and that the city enjoyed divine favor. Her role was not only spiritual but also symbolic, representing the fertility of the land and the prosperity of the people. One of the most prominent examples of a powerful woman in Sumerian history is Enheduanna, the high priestess of the moon god Nana in the city of Uruk. Enheduanna is widely regarded as one of the earliest known authors in history, and her work as a poet and priestess was celebrated throughout the region. Imagine her, standing in the grand ziggurat of Uruk, overseeing the rituals and prayers dedicated to Nana, her voice echoing through the sacred halls. But Enheduanna was not just a figure of devotion. Her writings were deeply influential. She composed hymns and poetry that exalted the gods and praised the city of Ur. Her words connected the divine with the everyday lives of the people, offering both spiritual guidance and a sense of unity. In addition to the high priestesses, there were other women who wielded power, albeit in more subtle ways. Royal women, for instance, were often married into political alliances, strengthening the bonds between different city-states. These marriages were not just about love or family, they were about power and influence. Imagine a royal wedding with guests from across the region coming together to witness the union of two powerful families. The bride, though not always in the political spotlight, would play a crucial role in maintaining the peace and alliances between kingdoms. Yet, despite the powerful roles some women held, the general social structure in Sumer was still largely patriarchal. Women were often expected to fulfill traditional roles as mothers, wives, and caretakers of the household. The ideal woman, as portrayed in Sumerian literature and myth, was one who upheld the values of family and domesticity, embodying the virtues of patience, obedience, and humility. Still, even within this framework, women found ways to assert their influence and navigate the complexities of Sumerian society. Consider the daily life of a woman in Sumerian society. She might spend her time weaving, cooking, caring for children, or managing the household. In some cases, women would also participate in religious ceremonies, offer prayers, and make sacrifices to the gods in the hopes of securing divine favor. Imagine the soft clink of pottery, the rhythmic motion of the loom, and the quiet hum of prayers as women fulfilled their roles, contributing to the fabric of society in ways that might go unnoticed, but were undeniably vital. As we reflect on the role of women in Sumerian society, it becomes clear that they were not just passive figures. Though their roles were often defined by tradition and societal expectations, many women were active participants in the political, religious, and economic life of the city-states. They held power in their own right through priesthoods, royal marriages, and family networks, and they left an enduring mark on the history of Sumer. The legacy of women like Enheduanna, with her poetry and influence, shows us that the voices of women were not merely whispers in the background. They were integral to the shaping of the culture, the religion, and the governance of the time. As we close this segment, we reflect on the complexity of gender roles in ancient Sumer. While men may have dominated the political and military spheres, women played essential roles in ensuring the continuity and prosperity of the civilization. Their influence was far-reaching, shaping everything from religion and politics to daily life. The women of Sumer, though often overlooked by history, were key players in the unfolding story of this ancient civilization, and their contributions deserve to be remembered. As we delve deeper into the world of Sumer, we cannot ignore the constant undercurrent of conflict that characterized the relationship between the city-states. Sumer was a land of vibrant cities, rich culture, and advanced technology, but it was also a region defined by rivalry, competition, and territorial disputes. The rise of city-states, each with its own ruler, god, and interests, created a complex web of alliances and conflicts that shaped the course of Sumerian history. Picture yourself in the heart of a Sumerian city-state like Uruk or Lagash, where the hum of daily life is interwoven with the tension of political maneuvering. The streets are filled with traders, artisans, and farmers, each contributing to the city's prosperity. But behind the scenes, the rulers of these cities are constantly assessing their power, their borders, and the balance of resources. The fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, though a source of abundance, was also a prize fiercely contested by neighboring city-states. These cities, despite sharing common cultural elements, were often in conflict. The Sumerian city-states were fiercely independent and governed by their own kings, who were both political leaders and religious figures. They competed for dominance over the fertile lands, control of water sources, and access to trade routes. As you walk through the markets of one city, you might hear whispers of rival city-states gathering their forces, preparing for battle over a disputed region or the right to access a valuable resource. One of the most famous conflicts in Sumerian history was the rivalry between the cities of Lagash and Umma. For years, these two city-states clashed over the control of fertile land along the Euphrates River. Imagine the tension between these two cities, each with its own powerful army, each determined to secure the land that was vital to their survival and prosperity. The rivalry was intense, with both sides employing military tactics, diplomatic strategies, and alliances to gain an advantage. In this world, war was not simply a matter of territorial expansion. It was also a way of maintaining political and religious power. The king's ability to lead his army to victory was often seen as a reflection of his divine favor. A victorious king would not only gain land and resources, but also strengthen his legitimacy and power in the eyes of his people and the gods. Imagine the sight of a victorious king returning to his city, riding in a grand chariot, with his soldiers and priests in tow. The city's inhabitants would gather to celebrate his triumph, offering sacrifices to the gods and praising the king for securing their future. But warfare in Sumer was not always about large-scale battles. Conflicts between city-states could also be waged through economic pressure, diplomacy, and alliances. Kings would often seek the support of neighboring cities to strengthen their position, forging temporary alliances that could shift with the ebb and flow of power. These alliances were fragile and often short-lived as the needs and interests of the cities changed. Imagine the careful negotiations that took place behind closed doors, where rulers would trade promises, resources, and even marriages to solidify their positions. As we picture these conflicts, we see that war was an integral part of the Sumerian way of life. It was not just a matter of survival. It was woven into the very fabric of the city-state's existence. The king's power was intrinsically tied to his ability to defend his city, expand its borders, and secure the resources necessary for its survival. Without war and conflict, the city-state would stagnate, unable to grow or assert its dominance over rivals. Yet, despite the constant strife, the Sumerians also recognized the need for peace. The idea of diplomacy and negotiation was not foreign to them, and kings would often seek peaceful resolutions to conflicts when possible. Treaties and agreements were drawn up, with both sides swearing oaths to uphold them. But peace was often temporary, and the underlying tensions never fully disappeared. The world of the Sumerian city-states was one of constant negotiation, where war and peace were in a delicate, ever-shifting balance. One of the enduring legacies of these conflicts is the detailed records left behind by the Sumerians. The kings who fought in these wars often had their victories inscribed on stone stelae, monumental slabs of stone that detailed the events of battle and the king's role in securing victory. Imagine the sight of a grand stone monument covered in intricate carvings and cuneiform inscriptions, recounting a king's military prowess. These stelae were placed in public spaces for all to see, serving as both a historical record and a symbol of the king's power. As we close this segment, we reflect on the role that conflict played in shaping the history of Sumer. The rivalry between city-states, while often destructive, was also a driving force behind innovation, governance, and the growth of the Sumerian civilization. It was through conflict that the Sumerians developed some of the earliest forms of military strategy, diplomacy, and law. The constant tension between the city-states created a dynamic and ever-evolving world, one where power, resources, and influence were fiercely contested. In this world, the rhythm of conflict and resolution shaped the course of history, leaving behind a legacy that would influence the civilizations that came after. As we turn our focus from the vibrant, often tumultuous world of Sumerian city-states, we must turn our gaze to the north, to the land of Akkad. In this next chapter of history, we witness the rise of a new power that would challenge the dominance of the Sumerians and forever alter the landscape of Mesopotamia. The Akkadian Empire, founded by Sargon the Great, would bring together the disparate Sumerian city-states under one unified rule, changing the course of history for centuries to come. Imagine yourself in the bustling city of Akkad, the heart of the newly formed empire. The air is thick with the sounds of soldiers marching, the clatter of chariot wheels, and the chatter of merchants exchanging goods from across the region. The city is growing rapidly, filled with people from various backgrounds and cultures, drawn together by the promise of stability, prosperity, and power under a single ruler. Akkad was not just a city. It was the symbol of a new era, an era of centralization, military might, and imperial ambition. Sargon, the first ruler of Akkad, was a man of humble origins. Born in the city of Kish, Sargon's rise to power is the stuff of legend. Picture the young man, determined and ambitious, navigating the complex web of politics and warfare in the region. Through cunning strategy, military prowess, and sheer determination, Sargon overthrew the rulers of the Sumerian city-states and established the Akkadian Empire. He was not content with simply ruling one city-state. He sought to unite them all, creating a centralized power that stretched across Mesopotamia. Under Sargon's leadership, the Akkadian Empire expanded rapidly. His military campaigns brought the Sumerian city-states into submission, and over time, he expanded his empire's borders even further, reaching into Elam to the east and parts of the Syrian and Anatolian highlands. Imagine the vast stretch of land under Sargon's control, deserts, rivers, and mountains, all united under one banner. The sight of the Akkadian army marching across the region, their armor glinting in the sun, must have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying to those who opposed them. Sargon's rise to power was not just about military conquest. It was also about forging alliances and building a strong, centralized government. He understood that in order to maintain control over his vast empire, he needed to create a system of administration that would allow him to govern effectively. To achieve this, he implemented a network of governors who would oversee the different regions of the empire. These governors were appointed by the king and were responsible for collecting taxes, administering justice, and maintaining order. Imagine the far-reaching influence of Sargon's system, each governor reporting back to the capital, ensuring that the king's will was carried out across the empire. The Akkadian Empire was also marked by cultural exchange and innovation. With the unification of the Sumerian city-states, the Akkadian rulers were able to bring together the rich cultural traditions of the region. The Akkadians adopted much of Sumerian culture, including their language, art, and religious practices, but they also added their own unique touches. Akkadian became the language of administration and commerce, replacing Sumerian in many areas, and the Akkadian script began to replace cuneiform in official records. Imagine the merging of cultures as Sumerian traditions were preserved while new Akkadian influences were introduced, creating a rich tapestry of art, literature, and religion. Despite the achievements of Sargon and his successors, the Akkadian Empire was not without its challenges. The empire was vast, and the logistics of maintaining control over such a large territory were daunting. Communication between the far-flung regions of the empire was slow, and uprisings in distant provinces were not uncommon. One of the most significant threats to the empire came from the Gutians, a group of people from the Zagros Mountains, who invaded Akkad towards the end of Sargon's reign and the early years of his successors. These invasions, coupled with internal strife and economic difficulties, weakened the empire and eventually led to its collapse. Yet, even after the fall of the Akkadian Empire, its legacy lived on. The Akkadians had set the stage for future empires in the region, demonstrating the power of military conquest, centralized governance, and cultural integration. Their influence can still be seen in the empires that followed, including the Babylonian and Assyrian empires, which would rise to prominence in the centuries to come. As we close this segment, we reflect on the significance of the Akkadian Empire. It was the first empire to unite the Sumerian city-states and create a truly centralized state, setting the blueprint for future empires in Mesopotamia. The rise of Sargon and the Akkadian Empire marked a turning point in the history of the region, demonstrating the power of unity, the importance of governance, and the enduring influence of Sumerian culture. The legacy of Akkad, with its military might and cultural innovations, would echo through the ages, shaping the future of the ancient world. As we move further into the story of Sumer, we must take a moment to reflect on one of the most enduring and fascinating aspects of Sumerian mythology: the Great Flood. The tale of a catastrophic flood that wipes out humanity has appeared in various cultures across the world, but it is in Sumerian texts, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the narrative takes on a particularly profound and memorable form. The Sumerians' version of the flood has captivated historians and scholars for centuries, prompting debates about its origins, its significance, and its relationship to other ancient myths of a great deluge. Picture yourself walking through the grand halls of the ziggurat in Uruk, where the sacred writings are kept, and imagine opening one of the ancient tablets that contains a version of the flood story. The characters, the gods, and the cosmic forces are all part of this vivid ancient narrative. The flood, in this version, is not merely a natural disaster. It is a divine act, a purging of the world's sins and a rebirth for humanity. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood is sent by the gods to punish humanity for their wickedness and noise. The gods, in their divine wisdom, decide that mankind has become too corrupt, too loud, and too troublesome for the heavens to tolerate. The flood is their solution, a way to cleanse the earth and start anew. The hero of the story, Utnapishtim, is warned of the coming deluge by the god Ea, who tells him to build a great boat to save himself, his family, and a sample of every living creature. This boat, much like Noah's Ark in the biblical tradition, will carry them through the storm, sparing them from the wrath of the gods. The flood itself is described as a cataclysmic event, rains falling in torrents, the waters rising uncontrollably, drowning the earth and all living things. Imagine the fear and uncertainty that would have gripped the people as they witnessed the heavens open up and the earth beneath them swallowed by water. For days the floodwaters rise, and the world is consumed by chaos. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim and his fellow survivors are left to float on the waters, waiting for the storm to subside. Eventually, the rains stop, the floodwaters begin to recede, and a new world emerges from the devastation. But what makes the Sumerian account of the flood particularly compelling is the way it ties into the broader narrative of divine justice. The gods in this myth are not merciful or kind. They are capricious and driven by their own desires. The flood is their solution to humanity's disobedience. For Utnapishtim, the flood is both a punishment and a blessing, as it marks the end of one era and the beginning of another. When Utnapishtim emerges from the flood and offers a sacrifice to the gods, they grant him immortality, allowing him to live on forever as a witness to the events of the past. Now, as we explore this great flood myth, we cannot help but notice its striking similarities to other ancient stories of a great deluge. The most famous of these, of course, is the biblical flood narrative in the story of Noah's Ark. The similarities between these two tales, Sumerian and Hebrew, have long been the subject of scholarly debate. The basic structure of the story is remarkably similar. A divine punishment in the form of a flood, a righteous man warned by a god, the building of a great vessel to save life, and the eventual receding of the waters. But why are these stories so similar? Could they be based on a shared cultural memory, passed down through generations and adapted by different peoples over time? Some scholars believe that the Sumerian flood myth predates the biblical account and that the story was adapted and preserved by later cultures. Others argue that the similarities are a result of the common human experience of catastrophic floods, which may have been more frequent in the ancient world due to natural events like heavy rains or overflowing rivers. Regardless of the origins, the fact remains that the Great Flood story is one of the most pervasive myths in human history, echoing across cultures and time periods. But the Sumerian account of the flood is not just about divine wrath and punishment. It also carries a deeper, more philosophical meaning. The flood, in many ways, represents the fragility of human existence and the transient nature of life. The gods in the story are depicted as beings who can destroy the world at will, and the flood serves as a reminder that, no matter how powerful humanity becomes, it is always subject to forces beyond its control. The survivors of the flood, like Utnapishtim, are left to reflect on the nature of life, death, and the divine order. The gods, despite their anger, are also seen as the arbiters of life and death, reminding the Sumerians of their place in the grand scheme of the cosmos. In the end, the story of the flood in Sumerian myth is not just a tale of destruction and survival, it is a meditation on the cyclical nature of life, the power of the divine, and the resilience of humanity. It speaks to the constant tension between human ambition and divine will, between the desire for immortality and the inevitability of death. As we reflect on this ancient myth, we realize that its themes still resonate with us today, as we continue to grapple with questions of power, justice, and the fleeting nature of life. As we conclude this segment, we reflect on the significance of the Great Flood in Sumerian mythology. It is a story that transcends time and culture, a reminder of the forces that shape our world and the divine will that governs the course of history. The flood is both a devastating catastrophe and a chance for renewal, a paradox that speaks to the heart of the human experience. As we continue our journey through the history of the Sumerians, we must eventually confront the reality of decline. Like all great civilizations, the Sumerian city-states were not immune to the forces of time, conflict, and internal strife. Despite their achievements in agriculture, writing, religion, and governance, the Sumerians were ultimately unable to prevent the erosion of their empire. The steady rhythm of their flourishing cities, which once echoed with the vibrancy of life, would eventually give way to the silence of decay. Imagine yourself standing in the once bustling streets of Uruk, now quiet and abandoned. The ziggurats, which once towered over the city, stand in shadow, their stone surfaces weathered by centuries of sun and rain. The marketplaces, where traders from distant lands once exchanged goods, are empty, their stalls overgrown with weeds. The walls of the city, which once protected its people, are now crumbling, a silent testament to the fragility of human civilization. The air, once filled with the sounds of life, now carries only the whisper of forgotten memories. The decline of Sumer was not caused by a single event, but by a series of factors that gradually undermined the stability of the city-states. One of the most significant factors was internal conflict. As we've already seen, the Sumerian city-states were often in a state of rivalry, each competing for resources, territory, and influence. This constant tension created a volatile environment, one in which the unity required for long-term prosperity was difficult to maintain. Imagine the weariness that must have crept into the hearts of the Sumerian kings, who, despite their best efforts, could not quell the incessant fighting between their cities. The rivalry between cities like Uruk, Lagash, and though it led to periods of growth and expansion, also sowed the seeds of instability. Each city-state, governed by its own ruler, was ultimately responsible for its own defense, and as the cities grew larger, the pressure on their resources increased. There were not enough supplies to go around, and as rivalries deepened, the cities became more fragmented and vulnerable. The Sumerians also faced challenges from outside their borders. As the Akkadian Empire rose to prominence in the north, the Sumerian city-states found themselves caught in a delicate balance of power. While the Akkadians initially absorbed many aspects of Sumerian culture, the pressure they exerted on the Sumerian city-states eventually contributed to their decline. The Akkadian invasions were followed by the Gutian tribes, who swept down from the Zagros Mountains, raiding and weakening the once strong Sumerian cities. The invasions from outside forces were compounded by environmental challenges. The Sumerians, who had relied heavily on irrigation to support their agricultural economy, faced increasingly severe problems with soil salinization. Over time, the canals and irrigation systems that had once brought prosperity to the land became less effective as the salt content of the soil increased. Crops began to fail, and the once rich farmland that had supported the cities became less productive. Imagine the frustration of the farmers who, despite their best efforts, could no longer coax life from the land. The harsh realities of nature's forces became impossible to ignore, and the agricultural base that had been the cornerstone of the Sumerian economy began to crumble. As the land became less fertile and the cities grew more fragmented, the Sumerians found it increasingly difficult to maintain their complex systems of governance, trade, and defense. The once great ziggurats, symbols of divine power and unity, began to fall into disrepair. The armies that had once marched to protect the city-states were no longer as strong or as organized. The Sumerians, who had once been the masters of their land, were now left vulnerable to the forces that had once been their allies, the rivers, the gods, and the very soil beneath their feet. By the time the 3rd millennium BCE came to a close, the Sumerian city-states had lost much of their former power. The Akkadian Empire, weakened by internal strife and invasions, eventually fell as well. Sumer was absorbed into the Akkadian and later the Babylonian empires, marking the end of an era. The Sumerians, once the architects of civilization in Mesopotamia, had faded into the background of history, their cities abandoned, their culture absorbed, and their political systems replaced by new powers. But even as Sumer's influence waned, its legacy lived on. The contributions of the Sumerians, writing, law codes, religion, and more, would continue to shape the civilizations that followed. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, and later the Persians would all build upon the foundation laid by the Sumerians. Though Sumer as a political entity had collapsed, its cultural and intellectual achievements would echo through the ages, influencing the course of history for millennia. As we conclude this segment, we reflect on the fall of the Sumerian city-states. Their decline was not just the end of a civilization, it was a reminder of the fragility of human endeavor. The Sumerians had built something truly remarkable, a civilization that stood as a beacon of innovation and achievement in the ancient world. But, like all things, their world eventually faded, leaving behind only the ruins of their cities and the remnants of their culture. And yet, even in their decline, the Sumerians left us with a rich legacy, one that would continue to inspire and shape the course of history. As we turn our gaze to the lasting impact of the Sumerians, we find that even in their decline, the civilization they built left an indelible mark on history. The Sumerian city-states may have faded into the annals of time, but the foundations they laid continue to resonate across the centuries. From their groundbreaking innovations in writing and law to their religious beliefs and cultural practices, the Sumerians helped to shape the very framework of human civilization. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet library, the air thick with the scent of ancient scrolls and tablets. You open one of the earliest clay tablets, its surface still etched with the delicate cuneiform marks that recorded the events of a long-lost era. The words on this tablet, though thousands of years old, speak to you across time, carrying with them the thoughts, the prayers, and the laws of a people whose civilization changed the world. This is the legacy of Sumer, their ability to write, to record their history, and to pass down their knowledge to future generations. One of the most significant contributions of the Sumerians was the invention of writing, specifically cuneiform. The Sumerians' development of a written language allowed them to record everything from trade transactions and legal codes to myths and religious texts. It is through these written records that we have come to understand so much about their society. Without cuneiform, the history of Sumer would have been lost to time, a forgotten civilization whose legacy would have never reached us. The Sumerian system of writing also had a profound influence on future civilizations. Cuneiform was adopted by neighboring cultures such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, who used it for their own records and writings. Over time, cuneiform evolved, but its core principles, its ability to represent both sounds and ideas, became the foundation for the development of other writing systems. Imagine the ripple effect that Sumer's innovation had across the ancient world as societies adopted and adapted the system to suit their own needs. Writing, as we know it today, owes much to the legacy of the Sumerians. But Sumer's legacy was not limited to writing alone. The Sumerians also contributed significantly to the development of law. The famous Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the earliest known legal codes, was created in Sumer and laid the groundwork for the legal systems that would follow. This code, etched into stone tablets, outlined laws regarding marriage, property, theft, and punishment. Imagine the meticulous process of creating these laws, carefully crafted to ensure fairness and order in a growing society. The principles of justice and governance enshrined in the Code of Ur-Nammu would be echoed in later legal systems, influencing the laws of the Babylonians, the Persians, and even the Romans. Sumer's impact on religion and culture was equally profound. The Sumerians were among the first to develop a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses, each responsible for different aspects of the natural world and human life. These gods were not distant or detached. They were intimately involved in the daily lives of the people. The Sumerians believed that their rulers were chosen by the gods, and that their actions on earth were guided by divine will. This connection between religion and governance would influence later civilizations, including the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans, where rulers were often seen as divine or divinely appointed. The religious practices of the Sumerians also left a lasting legacy. Their ziggurats, temples, and rituals became the blueprint for religious architecture and practice in the ancient Near East. The idea of a central sacred space where humans could connect with the divine would persist in later civilizations, influencing the development of temples, churches, and other religious structures across the world. Imagine the grandeur of the Sumerian ziggurats towering above the city, a symbol of the connection between earth and heaven. These structures, though long gone, still serve as a reminder of the Sumerians' deep religious devotion and their belief in the power of the gods. In addition to their contributions to writing, law, and religion, the Sumerians also played a crucial role in the development of mathematics and astronomy. They were among the first to use a system of counting based on the number 60, which is still in use today in the division of time and angles. The Sumerians also made significant advances in astronomy, tracking the movements of the stars and planets, and developing a calendar based on the lunar cycle. Imagine the sky above the Sumerian cities, dotted with constellations that they carefully observed and recorded. Their understanding of the heavens would lay the groundwork for the astronomical studies that would follow in later cultures. As we reflect on the Sumerian legacy, we see that their contributions were not just technical or practical, they were cultural, philosophical, and spiritual. The Sumerians understood that their lives were part of a larger, interconnected world, one governed by the gods, but also shaped by human action and ambition. Their society was a delicate balance of power, faith, and creativity, and the impact of their achievements can still be felt in the world today. As we conclude this segment, we take a moment to honor the Sumerians for their enduring contributions to human civilization. Their legacy is woven into the very fabric of our modern world, through the written word, through law, through religion, and through our understanding of the cosmos. Though their cities have long since crumbled and their civilization faded into history, the Sumerians' innovations continue to shape the course of our lives. The story of Sumer is a reminder that even in the face of decline, the impact of a civilization can last for millennia. Thousands of years have passed since the last of the Sumerian city-states fell into ruins. Their once vibrant streets now silent and overgrown. Yet, like all great civilizations, the Sumerians left behind traces of their existence, scattered fragments of their history, waiting to be rediscovered by the modern world. The ruins of Sumer lay buried beneath the sands of time, their secrets hidden from view. But the legacy of Sumer was not lost forever. It was only a matter of time before the curious minds of modern explorers and archaeologists would uncover the treasures of the past and reveal the richness of this ancient civilization to the world once more. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of an ancient mound in modern-day Iraq, the remains of a Sumerian city rising before you. This is the site of Ur, one of the most important and well-known Sumerian cities, long abandoned and forgotten. The air is thick with dust, and the land stretches out in all directions, barren and quiet. But beneath the earth, there are treasures waiting to be discovered: clay tablets, statues, inscriptions, and artifacts, all carefully preserved for thousands of years. The rediscovery of Sumerian civilization began in earnest in the 19th century, as archaeologists and explorers began to excavate the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. In 1854, the famous British archaeologist Sir Henry Rawlinson deciphered the ancient Akkadian cuneiform script, allowing scholars to begin translating the texts that had been hidden for centuries. Soon after, excavations at the ancient site of Nineveh revealed vast libraries of clay tablets, many containing stories, laws, and records from the Sumerians and their successors. The true breakthrough came with the excavation of the Sumerian city of Ur, led by Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1920s and 1930s. Woolley's work at Ur uncovered a wealth of information about the Sumerian civilization, including the discovery of royal tombs that had been buried for millennia. Imagine the moment when Woolley's team uncovered these tombs. Inside them, they found precious jewelry, artifacts, and the skeletal remains of Sumerian royalty, along with a glimpse into the elaborate burial practices of the time. The tombs contained artifacts of unimaginable value, including a magnificent lyre made from gold and lapis lazuli, as well as intricately carved statues and pottery. These finds offered scholars and the public alike a rare window into the opulence and sophistication of Sumerian life. In addition to the treasures found in the royal tombs, Woolley's team uncovered thousands of cuneiform tablets, which provided invaluable insights into Sumerian history, religion, law, and daily life. The cuneiform tablets found at Ur and other Sumerian sites contained a wealth of information, from commercial transactions and trade records to religious hymns and epic tales. These tablets allowed historians to piece together the story of the Sumerians, and through them, we gained an understanding of the ancient world that would have otherwise been lost. The rediscovery of Sumer also sparked a renewed interest in the study of ancient Mesopotamia, leading to further excavations at other Sumerian sites such as Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur. These excavations uncovered more evidence of the Sumerians' achievements, including advanced systems of irrigation, architecture, and urban planning. The sheer scale and sophistication of the Sumerian cities were revealed in the remnants of their ziggurats, temples, and city walls. The complex layout of these cities, with their carefully designed streets, marketplaces, and residential areas, painted a picture of a highly organized and advanced civilization. The rediscovery of Sumer was not just about uncovering material objects. It was about uncovering a lost world. The ancient cities, the stories, and the artifacts that have survived have allowed us to understand the Sumerians as real people, people who lived, loved, worked, and worshipped in ways that are not so different from our own. Their triumphs and struggles, their innovations and their failures, are all captured in the remnants they left behind. These remnants are a testament to their ability to create a civilization that, despite its decline, left a legacy that would echo through the ages. Today, the rediscovered knowledge of Sumer continues to shape our understanding of the ancient world. Modern historians, archaeologists, and linguists continue to study the Sumerians, uncovering new insights from the ancient texts and artifacts that have been unearthed. The Sumerians, once lost to the sands of time, are now a vibrant part of our shared history. As we reflect on this rediscovery, we can't help but marvel at the resilience of human knowledge and culture. Though the Sumerians themselves are gone, their achievements continue to influence us in ways we may not always recognize. From the written word to the creation of law codes, from the foundations of religion to the development of complex economies, the Sumerians' legacy has shaped the course of human civilization. As we close this segment, we reflect on the lasting impact of the Sumerians. Their civilization may have fallen, but their contributions to human history continue to resonate. The discovery of Sumer in modern times has allowed us to reclaim a piece of our shared past and has given us a deeper understanding of the roots of civilization. The rediscovery of Sumer is a reminder that the past, though sometimes buried and forgotten, can always be brought back into the light. As we near the conclusion of our journey through the rise and fall of the Sumerian civilization, we find that despite all the knowledge and discoveries we've uncovered, there remains a sense of mystery, an unanswered question that lingers in the air. The Sumerians were a people of great innovation, their cities filled with advancements in agriculture, writing, governance, and religion. Yet, even after centuries of study and excavation, much of their world remains shrouded in enigma. The questions that remain about the Sumerians speak not just to their ancient world, but to the very nature of human history itself. How much of the past can we ever truly understand? One of the greatest mysteries of Sumer is the question of why their civilization disappeared. While we know the factors that contributed to their decline, internal strife, external invasions, and environmental challenges, there is still no definitive explanation for why the Sumerians, a people so advanced and influential, were unable to maintain their dominance in Mesopotamia. Did the Akkadian invasions completely obliterate their culture? Or did the Sumerians, exhausted by years of conflict, simply fade into the background? Did the collapse of the agricultural systems, due to soil salinization and irrigation failure, lead to the eventual dissolution of their cities? While these theories provide insight, the full story of Sumer's demise remains elusive. Another enduring mystery surrounds the religious practices of the Sumerians. Their gods were numerous and powerful, each one responsible for different aspects of the world around them. From Anu, the god of the heavens, to Enki, the god of water and wisdom, the Sumerians believed their world was governed by these divine forces. Yet, despite the many temples and ziggurats dedicated to these gods, and the voluminous hymns and prayers that have been uncovered, much about Sumerian religion remains unclear. We know they believed in an afterlife, but what exactly that afterlife entailed is still a subject of debate. Was the afterlife a place of peace and renewal, or was it a shadowy, barren realm where the soul wandered endlessly? And what role did the kings and priests play in this complex spiritual world? These questions remain largely unanswered, leaving us to wonder how the Sumerians viewed their relationship with the divine. Then, there is the mystery of the Sumerian language itself. Though much has been deciphered, including the cuneiform script, the language of Sumer has not been fully understood. Sumerian is considered a language isolate, meaning it has no known relatives or direct linguistic ancestors. This makes it unique among ancient languages. Linguists have made great strides in translating Sumerian texts, but some aspects of the language, such as its grammar and certain words, remain elusive. Imagine the challenge faced by scholars as they painstakingly work to decode the meanings behind ancient symbols, many of which have multiple interpretations. With each discovery, we get closer to understanding the Sumerians' language, but the full extent of their linguistic system is still partially hidden from us. Perhaps one of the most enduring mysteries of Sumer lies in the grand epic that has captured the imagination of people for millennia, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This ancient story, full of gods, monsters, and quests for immortality, is much more than a simple tale. It is a deeply philosophical narrative, exploring themes of mortality, friendship, and the human quest for meaning. But the mystery remains. Did Gilgamesh, the historical figure, truly exist, or is he a purely mythical character? Was there a real king of Uruk who embodied the traits of the hero we see in the epic, or did the story evolve over time into a larger-than-life legend? The line between history and myth in the Epic of Gilgamesh is blurred, and while it may be rooted in truth, the extent of its fantastical elements remains a mystery. As we contemplate the enduring mysteries of Sumer, we are reminded that the past, though it may be studied and uncovered, will always retain an element of the unknown. The Sumerians were a people who lived and thrived in a world very different from our own, yet their legacy has influenced our modern world in ways we are only beginning to fully comprehend. The questions we still have about their society and culture speak to the complexity and richness of their civilization, a civilization that, despite its decline, still holds secrets waiting to be discovered. In the quiet remnants of Sumerian cities, buried beneath the sands of time, there are still stories to be told, and perhaps one day, as technology advances and new discoveries are made, we will unravel more of the mysteries that have eluded us for so long. Until then, the legacy of the Sumerians will continue to inspire wonder and curiosity, reminding us that the story of humanity is never truly finished. It is a story that continues to unfold, one discovery at a time. As we conclude this final segment, we are left with a sense of awe and reflection. The rise and fall of the Sumerian city-states is not just a story of the past. It is a reminder that the past is never truly gone. The mysteries of Sumer, like the civilizations that followed, will continue to shape the future, inspiring those who seek to understand the roots of human history and the enduring power of storytelling.